Talk to us about the betting. I mean, it really has exploded over the last few years since that Supreme Court ruling. How is it affecting the game? I know it's affecting the commercials we see in the game, but is it affecting the game itself?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. Good to be here. Is it affecting the game? Well, you're 19 times more likely to watch the game if you bet on the game. So I think for the hardcore fans, it has kind of invigorated them. Now, the other thing, too, when you think about the pros and cons of gambling, gambling's been going on for a long time. What we're talking about is reported legal gambling. So I'd much prefer to have legal gambling than unregulated gambling. So I think, on the positive side, regulation is better than unregulated. And it really does spur interest in the games, not only the game itself, but parts of the game as well.
And George, I mean, you make the comment that, of course, if you bet on the game, you're more likely to actually watch the game, which makes a lot of sense. And I'm wondering what that could mean for more niche sports. I mean, you think about track and field, for example, you think about soccer in the U.S., it feels like they would stand to benefit from legalized sports gambling.
100%. One of the things, Katie, you might not realize is that tennis is like the #2 most bet on sport in the world. So you're exactly right. For niche sports, it's another way to connect with your hardcore fans and general consumers. So 100% that they'll benefit from the gambling as well.
George, it's one thing to bet on the outcome of the game. It may be something different to bet on the performance of an individual player, particularly in college. As you know, Charlie Baker, the NCAA, has asked for prop betting on individual players to be banned. I think the state of Louisiana has actually banned it. How does that affect the play of individual players if you have prop betting? I know you have sons who've been in college sports.
Well, I think you're touching on an important point here is that, you have to regulate the sport, regulate the betting. And part of the regulation, whether it's illegal or legal, is to make sure that the players cannot be corrupted in a way that impacts the game negatively. And of course, that's been an issue for the last 40 or 50 years. But with an increase of betting, increase of legalized betting, I think it's an issue that, has to be watched closely and managed daily by everyone that governs or oversees a league or a federation.
Do you see that as the next evolution, that you would be able to bet on specific players, or not necessarily?
It's possible. I mean, I don't think you can rule anything out. I think the question's going to be, can you regulate it? And I think if I was overseeing a league or a federation or a conference, I'd want to know, how can I regulate something? If I can't regulate it or I can't enforce a rule, I probably don't want to have the rule. Or if I feel strongly about the rule, even if I know I can't totally enforce it, I create the rule. So I think in the case of President Baker, he's really has a legitimate concern and wants to make sure that, people can't bet on individual players. And that's a reasonable approach, given the difficulty in regulating 300 Division I basketball teams and 130 Division I football teams. So it's probably a good rule.
So, George, apart from betting on individual players, what about paying individual players? Something you and I have talked about before. Some coaches have come out and said maybe we should pay players, for example, for NCAA football. And now we have this phenomenon in Dartmouth where actually they've gotten a preliminary ruling. Maybe the men's basketball team could unionize. What do you make of that?
Well, I think right now you have 12 lawsuits going on in college sports around this issue. And I think when you look at college sports generating somewhere between $6 and $8 billion, it's hard to say that players on the field or the court don't get paid. I mean, you just had the college football playoffs raise $1.7 billion. It's hard for me to say that the players playing in those games should not be paid. So I think eventually, within 5 years, you're going to see players being paid. I think that's going to be the result of all this legal action. I think what will happen is you'll end up, players will collectively bargain, and that will bring order and predictability to a system right now that's really completely unregulated and unwielding. And so I think in the case of Dartmouth, which is kind of an extreme example, you saw the National Labor Relations Board vote in favor of the players. And when you see all the most recent legal activity, it is all going in the way of the players. To restrict people's actions, they have to be compensated, especially when there's $6 to $8 billion floating around.
Well, when it comes to Dartmouth, and of course that's a unique example, but it's interesting because you have the college contending that there's a difference between Ivy League programs and those of big sports schools. Of course, we're talking about the Power 5 conferences, for example. Do you think that that's a meaningful distinction? What do you make of that argument?
I kind of, from a legal standpoint, I'm not a lawyer, but I think it's probably not a distinction there. From a practical standpoint, I think there is a distinction. I think sports, and really it's the power of now 4 conferences that are generating that kind of money. Those players should be paid in a place where, sake of Dartmouth, I went to Brown, so not picking on Dartmouth. I'm not sure players at Brown or Dartmouth should be compensated, but it's clearly, the University of Alabama or Michigan, where they're generating tens of millions of dollars, I think the players should be compensated. And I think it's a more narrow application too. It's really football and basketball, and primarily football. When I mean primarily, it's 80 to 90% of the football revenue is what drives that $6 to $8 billion. And those individuals driving that revenue should be paid.
George, I don't want to let you go without coming back to where Katie began, actually, with Caitlin Clark and women's basketball. Is Caitlin Clark going to transform the WNBA the way she more or less has really made a big difference at the college level?
She could. I just want, it's amazing, and I feel great as being in the industry. That game last week was the highest rated basketball program in the history of ESPN. Women's sports right now has real traction. Global women's soccer is very popular. The U.S. game is popular for women. Women's basketball, women's volleyball, even the Pro Hockey League. You're seeing a traction with women's athletics in a way that you've never seen before, and I think that's terrific. And Caitlin Clark is a pioneer in that regard.